Alrighty, well, good morning, everybody. Oh, wait a minute here. We gotta clean the lens a bit here. See, there's a big streak across the. That's better, I think. Yeah. Anyway, good morning. It's nearly 9 o'clock in the morning, and it is Wednesday, April the 2nd, so the day after April Fool's Day. I've turned the heat on. It got unbearably cold in here, so I turned the heat on. I think I'm supposed to be getting that other truck to borrow today from the garage, so I'll be able to go and buy propane and so on and make sure that I have some propane here. Yeah, anyway, it's funny, but I'm thinking about something, and again, maybe I'm off base here with it, but it's just something that's floating around in my mind, so I'm going to share it with you a bit. As you probably all know, there's a lot of talk these days about smart cities and, different things like that. Smart cities is one of the things that's being talked about, where the population would be kept contained within a 15-minute, what they call a 15-minute or a smart city. And it's being promoted as that it would be very convenient because all your basic needs would be within a 15-minute walking distance, or I don't know if it's walking or driving or cycling, but I don't know if that's ever been established, but they say within 15 minutes of where you live. So no matter where you are in this space, you've got a grocery store within 15 minutes, you got a doctor within 15 minutes, you've got, hardware store, clothing store, etc., all within 15 minutes of your apartment. There won't be people living in houses in these cities, I don't think. It'll all be small apartments. And basically, when you're living in this 15-minute city, you won't be able to leave except with special permission. You'll only be able to go so far away from your apartment, and you won't be able to go any further. You'll come up against a wall or some sort of an electronic surveillance grid or something that would either prevent you from leaving or would fine you. You'd have to pay a fine if you were to leave without authorization. They're talking about allowing people to travel a few hundred miles once every so many years to visit relations or whatever, provided they live within a few hundred miles of you. And, basically rationing food, rationing clothing, and etc. So you'll have a grocery store within 15 minutes, but you'll be limited as far as what you'd be allowed to buy. This would also come with a digital ID and a programmable digital currency and so on. And so that if you didn't act in a way that the powers that be deem appropriate, if your speech wasn't appropriate in their estimation, or if your behavior wasn't appropriate in their estimation, then they could restrict you. Basically, they could restrict you from certain things. They could maybe suspend your privilege to go and visit your loved ones once every 2 years or whatever. Instead of being able to buy say 3 suits of clothes every year, maybe you'd only be allowed to buy one, or maybe you'd be told you can't buy certain things at the grocery store, or your money would be devalued so that you couldn't, so that your money would have less spending power than that of a citizen who is in good standing. I don't know, different things anyway they're talking about doing. And they're saying that once we're under AI surveillance, artificial intelligence surveillance, that, well, we'll be on our best behaviors then. This is the sort of rhetoric that we're hearing, I have some major problems with all that. I don't want any part of it. I'm not a city dweller by nature anyway. I don't really care for the city. I've gone there. I can go there for a short time and it's okay, but I don't really care for it. And I suppose I have a personality where I don't really get along with other people. On my report cards when I was a kid, the teacher used to write, "does not work well with others." So, just to give you an idea, that's the way I am. So, I kind of need to have a little space around me. Not only for my benefit, but for the benefit of the other people, because the other people don't want to deal with me either. Really. I mean, they don't want me up in their face all the time, in their space and everything. They don't care for me either. So, it's by mutual agreement, really, that I kind of stay over here in my little area and they do their thing over there. And, in the country, you can do that. In the country, you can go for days or even weeks and never see another person if that's what you want to do. Um, in the city, that's a lot harder to do, you know. And I mean, so unless you're a person who's a real extrovert and who is good at morphing into whatever the other person expects you to be and kind of becoming what other people want you to be all the time and stuff like that, you're going to have a tough time living in the city. Really, you are. You're going to have a real tough time of it because you're just not going to get along. And I found that, my interactions with people are fine as long as it's done in small doses. I mean, I can't be around other people all the time. It just doesn't work. In fact, if I ever got sent to prison, I think the hardest part for me of prison would be living in close proximity to other people, having to share a small space with another man, having to just constantly be elbow to elbow with other people, and stuff. I think that would be the hardest part for me of prison if I ever had to go to prison. So these smart cities, to me, they're a nightmare, really. They're not a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Plus, just the idea even that the authorities can restrict your ability to move about, that the authorities can, tell you what you can think and what you can say and how you can act, what you can do. They can tell you what you can eat, what you can buy, everything, Again, that sounds an awful lot like jail to me. It does. It's like, because look, a prison is a self-contained community. Just by the nature of a prison, it has to be. Because if you're in prison, they can't have you running out into the community to get a haircut or to buy food or whatever, or to see a doctor or whatever. They can't do that. You're confined to the prison grounds, really. And so when you're in prison, you're not allowed to leave the prison grounds. And so they have to have the community contained within the prison. So basically, a prison is actually a 15-minute city, if you look at it. If you go to prison, they have the cafeteria where you eat your meals. You eat what they serve. You don't have a lot of choice. Tonight is such and such a dinner, that's what we're serving. If you don't like it, then you don't eat. That's all. We'll bring you a tray. If you don't like your tray, then I guess you're not going to eat. That's how it is. So they have the cafeteria where you get your food, the mess hall or whatever. They have the store, the commissary, they call it, the store, where you can buy chips and pop and canned foods and stuff like that. If you don't like what's on the menu, I suppose you have a little bit of choice. If you have some money in your pocket, if you have some money on your books, as they say, you can buy food from the commissary. And if you don't like the tray that's being served, you can make your own little meal up or whatever from whatever you've gotten from the commissary, provided you got money to pay for it. They have a barber shop. You go get your hair cut on the prison grounds. Everything is there. They have an infirmary. If you're really seriously sick or injured, then they have to take you to an outside hospital. But they do have a little hospital within the prison. Well, basically that is a 15-minute city, because if you're in prison, these things are all probably within 15 minutes of your jail cell. When you step out of your jail cell into the corridor, the barber shop, the commissary, the mailroom, the infirmary, and anything else that you might need is within 15 minutes. The cafeteria, you probably don't have to walk any more than 15 minutes to get to the thing that you're going to get to the barber shop for a haircut, or to go pick up your commissary bag or that you've ordered, or to go to the cafeteria and eat whatever they're serving, or whatever. You probably don't have to go anymore. You probably don't have to walk any more than 15 minutes to do that. Plus, in prison, if you have money on your books, as they say, money that could be spent at the commissary and so on, if you have a court order against you that you have to pay restitution for your crime, they can seize that money. So let's say your mom comes and she puts $50 on your books. If you've got a court order again, you're not going to see that $50. That's going to be taken out of your account, and it's going to be applied to your debt. It's going to be applied to your restitution, to your victim, or whatever, you see. So there already is a little bit of that where they can basically relieve you of your money. If you're in prison, you can be relieved of your money under certain circumstances. I'm not making a comment as to whether or not that's right. I'm not saying they shouldn't be able to do that in prison. I'm just pointing out, so don't everybody pile up on me and say, oh, look what they did to their people. Look what they did, they deserve that. And F you for, being a thug hugger and all that. But that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm doing is I'm drawing a parallel between prison and 15-minute cities. I'm trying to make the comparison. I'm looking at all the things that are similar between, life in prison and life in a 15-minute city, as it's being portrayed, as we're being told it would be. Also, in prison, they issue you a uniform. You're only entitled to so many uniforms over the course of a period of time. And they'll actually, even if they search your cell, if they do what they call a shakedown and they search your cell, if you have too much of a certain thing, if you have too many pairs of underwear, you got too many white t-shirts, you got too many pairs of socks or whatever, they'll seize the excess, because they have determined that a prisoner needs a certain number of pairs of underwear, a certain number of t-shirts, a certain number of pairs of socks, and so on. So if they've determined that you shouldn't be in possession of any more, say, than 10 pairs of underwear, and when they search your cell, they find that you've got 15 pairs of underwear, guess what? They're going to take 5 pairs of underwear away from you. And they have the right to do that because you're in prison. So they get to tell you what you're allowed to have and what you're not allowed to have. It's their house. Basically, they can do what they want. And so here's the thing. Again, 15-minute cities, you'll be allowed to buy, free articles of clothing every year or whatever, I mean, it's similar. There's a similar thing there. Like I say, it's all very, there's a lot of similarities. And I'll make another comparison while I'm at it. And again, this comparison may be stretching it a bit. But it's another undesirable thing I want to compare it to, and that is during the 1930s and 40s in Germany and in other German-occupied places. We know that there was the Holocaust occurred. And we know that one of the groups, in fact, the main group that was targeted by the Holocaust, they weren't the only group, there were others too, but the main group that was targeted by the Holocaust were the Jewish people, because the Jewish people were the scapegoats. Everybody knew it was the fault of the Jews. Germany's in such bad shape because of those damn Jews. Everybody knows that, you know. And that's what they said, basically. We're going to blame the Jews. It's all on the Jews. And then they also mounted a propaganda campaign to say that the Jewish people were carriers of disease and, all sorts of things, and therefore had to be contained and had to be eliminated and so on. And unfortunately, people bought into it for the most part. And, people love a scapegoat. Nobody wants to be responsible for their own predicament. When times are tough, the last thing you want to do is to have to say, you know what? Because most of us don't have the character to do it. To say, you know what? Maybe there were some outside influences that affected the outcome, but ultimately I didn't manage my own affairs properly, and that's why I'm in the mess I'm in. Most people don't have the character to say that. Most of humanity wants it to be somebody else's fault. And so, of course, Hitler offered them up the Jews. And anti-Semitism was already a common thing in that era, and in Europe especially, and in that era. And so it was an easy sell. We're going to offer you up a group of people you're already inclined not to like. You're already inclined to dislike these people, and we're going to offer them up as the reason for all your troubles. We're going to offer them up as the scapegoats, and we're going to promote a narrative where we tell you if we just eliminate these people, we eliminate all these troubles. And then we'll have a perfect world and a perfect society, and everything will be wonderful. But look, in my situation, it'd be nice to have other people just to lay all the blame on. And other people did play a part. Like I say, I didn't get here by myself in the situation I'm in now. I didn't get into a situation where I'm freezing in a rickety old camper in the middle of a field. I didn't do that all by myself, but I definitely was the author of my own misfortune in many ways, because I trusted people I shouldn't have trusted. I made some bad decisions, and I trusted people I shouldn't have trusted. The people who caused this situation, who were partners with me in causing this situation, they couldn't have become partners with me in causing this situation had I not trusted them. And that was a decision that I made, and it was a bad decision. So even in that case, even in the case of, yes, other people are somehow involved in what's happened and have become, and really are at least partially to blame for it, in the end, I could have really limited their involvement had I not trusted them. And so that's my fault. Ultimately, it's my own fault, you see. But most people don't like to admit that. They say, well, I'll just blame the other guy. It's this one and that one's fault. Nothing's my fault. And like I say, this is what they did with the Jews anyway. They blamed the Jews for all their problems. It wasn't the fact that they had made bad decisions and that they had made mistakes and so on. No, we did nothing wrong. It's all those people. We get rid of those people, everything will be great. And so what happened was, of course, we had the Holocaust. But leading up to the Holocaust, what we had was the Jewish ghettos, where they basically walled off a section of the city, and they herded all the Jews in there. They forced all the Jews to live in there, and they weren't allowed to leave. And again, no, this was a 15-minute city. Everything that you were able to get that you might need to survive was supposed to be within within a short distance walk of the apartment that you were living in your 50s in this little city, which was a ghetto basically. They called it the Jewish ghetto. And you weren't allowed to leave. You couldn't just venture out beyond that area. If you were a Jewish person, you were required to stay there. You were required to stay put in that contained area. And then, of course, when it came time for the purge, they knew where all the Jews were because they put them all in this area. It was like a holding pen, and they were getting the infrastructure together for the Holocaust, while they were holding these people in a holding pen, basically in a Jewish ghetto. Like I say, now when they were in the Jewish ghetto, of course there were shortages of everything, and there was a lot of hunger and a lot of hardship. But still, whatever was available within that space. What little food there was that a Jewish person could eat could be found a short walk from wherever it was they were being kept, from the apartment they were living in the Jewish ghetto. Not that there was a lot of food or anything. A lot of people got sick. A lot of people died in those ghettos because they were deprived of things, But still, what little was available within that space. So in that sense, it mirrors these proposed smart cities or 15-minute cities. Also, it mirrors prison, because again, whatever's available is available within that space, within the grounds of the penitentiary. And, wherever you need a haircut or a can of soup or a bag of potato chips, or you need to have a Band-Aid put on a cut and a little antiseptic applied or whatever, it's all a 15-minute walk from your cell. It's all within 15 minutes, and you're not allowed to leave. And you're told what you can have and how much of a thing you can have. You're told what you can eat. Your money can be taken from you, as I said earlier. They can take your money from you and apply it to other things if they choose to. If a court orders that be done, then they'll do it. And so, again, there are parallels to be drawn here, And I don't know about you, but living in the kind of atmosphere that the Jewish people were forced to live in back in the 1930s, are living in a penitentiary setting doesn't appeal to me. I mean, I'm willing to live in a penitentiary setting under certain circumstances if that's the price I got to pay for standing up for myself against somebody who's trying to do me harm, or if that's the price I got to pay for disobeying the authorities, for continuing to exercise free speech, when that's not allowed or whatever, then I'm willing to go to prison, but I don't consider it an ideal situation. I don't consider it a situation that I would strive for, or that I would have an ambition for, or whatever. So for me, I see these 15-minute cities they're talking about as just not being any good, no good for us anyway. And one of the reasons that per capita you get more strange and aggressive behavior with people in cities, not that it doesn't happen in the small towns and in the country, but the reason you get more of it in the city per capita, I mean, obviously with more people you get more of everything, but I'm talking about per capita, so per person. The reason that you'll get a higher number of people who don't act in a very nice way is because it's unnatural. We need our space. And it isn't just people like me who have the kind of personality I have that need their space. It's everybody. Even a real extroverted person even somebody who's, one of those, ha ha, hi, how you doing, buddy? And slapping the other guy on the back and good to see you, and all that. Even that guy needs his space. And I guarantee you a lot of people need their space away from him, myself being one of them, But yeah, even he needs his own space at times, And if you deprive people of that, then you get weird behavior and you get aggressive behavior. People's minds get changed. A person becomes something they were never meant to be, really. And it's not good. We all need our space. I mean, even in relationships, you take a relationship between a man and a woman. I mean, I've given up on all that myself, but still, if you haven't and you're in a relationship now, or you have been in a relationship, you'll know what I mean. You may love the other person and you may love being with them. You may love being around them and so on. But even in that kind of a relationship, you need a certain amount of alone time. You need a certain amount of space. If that person is always there, and you're never away from them, you'll get sick of it. You get sick of each other. It's like you overdose on that person, and you'll get that you develop a resistance to them. And you want them to go away. Oh God, why don't you just go away? You'll get into that frame of mind. My neck's bothering me. Anyway, that's the bottom line. Cramming people together like that into that kind of an environment isn't good. You always get bad results when you do it. There's no, and basically what you're talking about is a prison. That's what a 15-minute city is. It's a jail city. Anyway, that's it. Yeah, I think Rocky must be in his box. Let's have a look and see here. We'll fire up the patented Camp Crazy Rocky Cam, and we'll see. Oh, there he is. Yep, there he is in his box. Yeah, there we go. Boop, 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 boop. There he is, having a sleep in his box with his fish. He loves that fish, he does. Anyway, that's it. We'll talk to you later.